Hello, everybody, and welcome into the newest episode of the Missing Piece podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And if you guys like what you hear, like and subscribe, and tell all your friends about this podcast. But thank you guys for listening in, and we got a jam-packed episode for you guys today. So we'll go over Pacers news going on. They signed a center to a 10-day contract, and they will they play a game tonight, and we'll go over the Pacers games from the last time we talked. We'll go over the first IndyCar races today going on in St. Petersburg, Florida today, so we'll talk about that for a little bit. We'll talk about March Madness, IU continuing their winning streak going into the month of March. We'll talk about the other teams on the bubble that you got to watch out for IU. And we'll finish up with some Colts Combine news, some Colts free agency news, and we'll go over NFL free agency this week. So without further ado, guys, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So, the Pacers needing a third center signed Tony Bradley to a 10-day contract. Obviously, you have Miles Turner and you have Thomas Bryant. Those two are your starting centers, but you don't really have a third center behind them right now. They tried Jahlil Okafor. I don't think that worked out. So they signed Tony Bradley to a 10-day contract to see maybe Tony Bradley can be that third center that the Pacers are looking for. I know they tried to sign Alex Len, but Alex Len ended up going to the Lakers where he knew he was going to get more minutes. The Pacers are coming off a loss to the Miami Heat by 5 points in Miami, and they currently sit fifth right now in the East, which, if you're the Pacers, man, you got to get back to winning because you play the Bulls tonight, and you got to beat the Bulls because you got Milwaukee right above you by a half game, and then you got Detroit right behind you. So, and Detroit's on a winning streak right now, so you gotta keep winning if you're the Pacers, especially if you want home court in the first round. So, but Tyrese has been playing really well since the All-Star break. Siakam had a really good night against Miami. I believe he had close to 40 points that game, so, but it just wasn't enough against Miami, so Pacers have got to beat the Bulls tonight, and they got to keep winning. Some IndyCar news. The first IndyCar race is today in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's the first race of the season. It starts at noon, I believe, so we'll let you guys know who wins that race. And it's coming up on the month of May, guys. It's March already, and it's May's coming up around the bend, so so excited for IndyCar to be back, and we'll keep you guys updated on those as well as the standings with that. Spring training baseball, the Cubs have been playing really well. I believe they're undefeated. They've won games and tied some, but, spring training's not really a good measure of how the season's going to go, but if you're the Cubs, you upgraded with Kyle Tucker and Presley and all that, so the Cubs, I think, should be a better team this year coming into the MLB season. Maybe even, I think they have a chance to win the division because the Cardinals got worse. Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. Cincinnati should be a good team, but not as good as the Cubs or the Brewers. I think if you're the Cubs, you're chasing Milwaukee for the division. So, I think if you're the Cubs, you got a lot better this offseason. So maybe you can make a run at winning the NL Central and maybe getting into the playoffs, and that'd be an amazing year for the Cubs. Hopefully make a run. Maybe you can get another World Series, but there's a lot of competition between the Dodgers and the Mets and all those guys. So, but I think without further ado, we'll get into some March Madness stuff. So, hold on, guys. So, for March Madness stuff, IU taking care of business. I mentioned last week they had 2 games between the last time I talked to you to now. They played Penn State at home, which they won by 5, which, it's not good to beat Penn State by 5, but Penn State is a very feisty team. They gave Maryland all they could handle yesterday. So, the fact that you beat Penn State is a good, and that's a quad 1 win, I believe, because Penn State's not a bad team, and they're really feisty. So, and then they beat the living snot out of Washington yesterday. So, that's a really good 2-game win streak for IU. They have 2 games left before the Big Ten tournament currently. Right now, They play Oregon on Tuesday at Oregon, and then they play Ohio State at home on Saturday. So, those two games, I don't expect IU to win both because they're both really good teams, but if you can win one of them, and then you go into the Big Ten tournament, which I believe IU is currently ninth right now in the Big Ten, and they'd be playing Illinois in round one, which those two teams are going in different directions. Illinois is going down, and IU is going up. So if you're IU and you beat one of Oregon or Ohio State, and then you go into the Big Ten tournament, which is in Indianapolis, and let's say you beat Illinois in the first round, and then you get to play Michigan State round two, and you lose to Michigan State, but pretty closely. I think IU would be pretty safely in the field in the NCAA tournament. So, if you're IU, you still got some work to do. I think if they manage to win both, they're very safely in, no matter what happens in the Big Ten tournament. But two big games for IU coming up. I think if you can come away with one of them, I think you're pretty safely in. So the IU's got that going for them this week. Other teams around and let me pull up the scores from them, but other teams that are on the bubble currently, you had Texas on the bubble, I don't think Texas is going to make it this year. They've had two bad losses. They lost to Arkansas, who we'll get to in a minute, and they lost to Georgia, which we'll also get to in a minute. So if you're I don't think Texas is going to make it in. Texas is already, I believe, at 13 losses on the year. Let me look them up real quick. But, yeah, Texas, that's a really bad, yeah, they lost, they got their butts whooped by Georgia, 83-67, and Texas is at 67 losses, is at 13 losses, my bad. So, I don't think in Texas, you still gotta play Mississippi State at Mississippi State, and you still gotta play another bubble team in Oklahoma, who we'll get to in a minute, but the way Texas is playing right now, Trey Johnson's the only player that's playing really well right now. I believe Trey Johnson, he had 12 points he had 12 points, but Trey Johnson, who's definitely going to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft this upcoming year, but he's the only guy that's playing well right now. So, I don't think you have to worry about Texas very much. Georgia is other bubble teams you got to worry about. Georgia's another one. So Georgia, I mentioned, beat Texas at Texas, and then Georgia currently, their last game, they beat Florida by 5. So if you're Georgia, those are 2 quad 1 wins that you've just made if you're the Bulldogs. And then their last 2 games before the SEC tournament, you play South Carolina, who beat the living snot out of Arkansas, which we'll get to in a minute. And then you play a team that's probably for sure, I think right now is going to be in the field in the tournament, is Vanderbilt at home. So if you're Georgia, you got some good games coming up. But in Georgia, I think those 11 losses, I think the committee would be willing to look past them, because the SEC has just been a gauntlet this year between Auburn and Florida and Kentucky and all them. So, I think Georgia's on the bubble right now. I mentioned Arkansas earlier. Arkansas coming off that win against Texas. They beat Missouri at home. But then they followed that up by putting up a stinker against South Carolina, which they lost 72-53. So, if you're Arkansas, man, I think you have 2 games left. You play Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt, which I alluded to earlier is probably going to make the tournament. And you got Mississippi State at home. So if you're Arkansas, man, you got 2 games. You're probably going to have to win. You're definitely going to have to win one, if not both. Because I thought if they would have beaten South Carolina, I thought Arkansas would have been very safely in. But right now, they lost to South Carolina. So, we'll see how the Razorbacks do. Other teams on the bubble, I mentioned Oklahoma. Oklahoma, coming off a loss to Ole Miss yesterday by 3. And Oklahoma's had some pretty close losses. They lost to Kentucky by a point on Wednesday last week. So, but if you're Oklahoma, you have some quality wins. You beat Mississippi State at home. And you beat Vanderbilt, who I mentioned earlier. You beat Arkansas. You beat South Carolina. So, if you're Oklahoma, you have Oklahoma's also on the bubble, and you got a really good game coming up with Missouri at home, which Missouri's coming off a loss. So if you can beat Missouri at home on Wednesday, I think Oklahoma's got a really good shot, and then you go on the road to Texas, which I mentioned earlier. Texas is really struggling right now. So if you're an IU fan, I think you're cheering against Oklahoma against Missouri. Let's see, other bubble teams. I think Xavier is another one. I think with the win yesterday against Creighton for Xavier, I think Xavier is going to be pretty safely in. Xavier is currently 19-10, and the one thing that was keeping Xavier out of the tournament was they didn't have a quality win. And they got one yesterday against Creighton at home. So I think if you're Xavier, I think Xavier is pretty safely in right now. And they dominated that whole game against Creighton. So, and look at Xavier's last two games. They played Butler, at Butler, which I'd imagine Xavier is going to beat Butler. Butler's not a very good team this year. And then they play Providence at home on Saturday, which, again, Providence is even down the list, even down in the rankings behind Butler. So, I think Xavier, right, I think the Big East is going to have 5 teams in UConn, St. John's, Creighton, Xavier, and I think they got, hold on, let me see here. Yeah, and Marquette. So, I think Xavier's going to be pretty safely in right now. North Carolina's another bubble team right now. North Carolina's kind of figured out, how to play with their guys, because they beat the snot out of Miami, which Miami's not a very good team this year. And if you're North Carolina, you gotta beat Virginia Tech on Tuesday, because if you lose to Virginia Tech, your last game is against Duke at home. So, and I don't think North Carolina's talented enough to beat Duke at home in North Carolina. So, but I think North Carolina is also another team that is on the bubble that I think would get in. So, and then elsewhere in the Big Ten, so I think if you're IU, the other team I mentioned that they're going to play is Ohio State. And Ohio State is definitely on the bubble right now. So if you're Ohio State, their last 2 games are against 2 teams that are on the bubble with them. They play Nebraska at home on Tuesday, and we'll get to Nebraska in a minute, because I think if you're Nebraska, the way you've been playing lately, you've played yourself into the bubble. But Ohio State plays Nebraska at home on Tuesday, and then they go to Bloomington to play IU on Saturday. So that might be a really big one against Ohio State and Bloomington. But I think Ohio State is definitely on the bubble currently. And then I mentioned Nebraska. Nebraska, I think, is playing themselves on the bubble as well. Because Nebraska came off a loss yesterday to Minnesota at home, which is that's a bad loss for Nebraska. That's not a good loss to have on your resume. So if you're Nebraska, you got a couple of tough ones in your last 2. You play Ohio State at Ohio State, which I mentioned is also currently on the bubble. And then you play Iowa at home on next Sunday, a week from today. So, Nebraska's not looking for the Huskers right now. Good for the Huskers currently. So, if you're IU, those are the bubble teams that you have to watch going into this week. Like I said, if you're IU, if you win both Oregon at Oregon, and then Ohio State at home, I think you're pretty safely in. If you win one of them and you win a Big Ten tournament game, I think you're pretty safely in as well. So, those are just the bubble teams to watch out for the March Madness tournament. And I think with that, we'll get into the Combine news. So, I do have a list of the prospects that we know of for sure that the Colts interviewed at the Combine, and you'll notice a pattern here. So, we'll start out with defensively, which there's not a whole lot of them. So defensively, you had the Colts met with linebacker Barrett Carter from Clemson. They met with Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. And they met with Max Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, which if you watched Max Hairston yesterday, man, on Friday, man, he was really good. Like, he ran like a 4.2 40. He tested out of his mind there, and Max Hairston is a uber athletic corner, so, those are the three defenders that they've met with that we know of. Actually, there's a fourth one in safety Malachi Moore from Alabama. So those are the four defensive prospects that they met with, and I think most of the ones that we know of are offensive ones. So, and they met with a lot of running backs. So we got four of them, and it's a wide variety. So they met with Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, which, if they get Ashton Jeanty, man, him and Jonathan Taylor together would be awesome. But I don't think Ashton Jeanty's going to get to 14. I think Ashton Jeanty's going to be long gone. They met with Ollie Gordon, the running back from Oklahoma State, who I think Ollie Gordon would be a really good running back too with Jonathan Taylor. They met with Bashul Tate from Virginia Tech, which if you watched Bashul Tate yesterday, he was awesome in his combine. Like, he ran really well, he tested really well, so I think Bashul Tate from Virginia Tech is really rising up boards. I think he may go early day 3, late day 2. He might have really helped himself out yesterday. And they met with Corey Kiner, the running back from Cincinnati. So that was a wide variety of running backs that the Colts met with, from round 1 with Ashton Jeanty to like a day 3 guy and Corey Kiner from Cincinnati. So, those are a wide variety of running backs they met. They also met with two tight ends. The top two tight ends in this draft class the Colts met with Tyler Warren from Penn State, and they met with Colston Loveland from Michigan. So those are obviously the top 2 tight ends in this draft class, and I think you can throw in Mason Taylor from LSU as well. I think Mason Taylor mentioned that he met with every single team, whether it was at the Combine or if it was at the Senior Bowl, which Mason Taylor was at. So I think the Colts did meet with Mason Taylor. I just don't know if it was at the Senior Bowl or if it was at the Combine. But meeting with arguably the top 3 tight ends in this draft class. So I think the Colts are going to be really looking at tight end early in this draft class based off of the 3 tight ends that we know that they've met with. We'll talk about quarterbacks. So they did meet with Quinn Ewers from Texas. And we'll get to quarterback and free agency in a minute, because there was a report that came out from Jeremy Fowler at the Combine with the Colts and their quarterback situation. So, but Quinn Ewers is definitely a polarizing one. There are some other quarterbacks I like over Quinn Ewers in this draft, and Will Howard from Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. Jackson Dart really impressed me yesterday. Brady Cook from Missouri impressed me yesterday. He had a really good showing yesterday. But we'll see what the Colts do at if they take a quarterback in this draft class, which, I'm being honest, guys, I would not be surprised if they take a quarterback. And then they met with a guy that I really like, and I'm being honest, if the Colts lose Will Fries in free agency, and you cut Braden Smith, and you lose Ryan Kelly in free agency, I think taking this guy round 1 would be a really good choice, and that's Tyler Booker from Alabama. Tyler Booker's really athletic, and if you listened to his interview yesterday, you would love Tyler Booker, and he mentioned in his interview that he takes joy out of making people lose love for the game because he gets in their heads and he blocks them so well. And you just want that guy on your team, on your offensive line, and you put him in on this offensive line with the offensive line coach we have, which is in Tony Sperano, which is a really good offensive line coach. Man, him and Quentin Nelson at guard. I don't think anybody's getting to whoever the quarterback's going to be off of the inside. I think you're going to have to get to him on the outside. But that'd be a really good one. And I think your interior offensive line would be Quentin Nelson, Tanner Bordolini would be your center, and then you'd put Tyler Booker at right guard. Man, that's a really good interior offensive line. So, watch out if the Colts do lose Will Fries in free agency. Watch out for Tyler Booker round 1. I think that'd be a really good pick, and I think that'd be an easy hit pick for Chris Ballard, who I think really needs a hit right now. So, but we'll get into the combine news. So for the Colts, and which will transition to free agency here. So, it came out that Jeremy Fowler was talking about the Colts quarterback said that they were going to meet with. Hold on, my bad, guys. I'm trying to look it up here for you guys so I can get it in here. Because it mentioned there was an update on there, but in that update it mentioned that Jeremy Fowler was talking to people at the combine, and the Colts came up as quarterback options, and they mentioned that the 5 names that came up for them was Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, which if you guys know, Jacoby Brissett was a Colts backup quarterback, and I think still has a lot of respect in this Colts locker room. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was Jacoby. Justin Fields, which Justin Fields is probably the biggest name out of these guys. And he mentioned Daniel Jones as one of the quarterbacks that the Colts have talked about. And he said that Daniel Jones's name came up more than once with the Colts at the combine. So with that, I think we'll transition into free agents for the Colts. So, and I think we'll talk about each position, and we'll go over what the position looks for the Colts, and we'll go over some free agents. So I think we'll start off with quarterback. So, with quarterback, the only 2 quarterbacks currently on this roster right now, Anthony Richardson's one of them. Jason Bean is the other, who was your practice squad quarterback last year. So I do think the Colts are probably going to be looking at a backup quarterback either in free agency, or I don't mind taking one in the draft just because it's going to be probably a lot cheaper to bring in a backup quarterback in the draft than it would be in free agency. But the ones in free agency that I'll talk about, I'll briefly touch on Sam Darnold. I don't think the Colts are going to get Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold's going to want a lot of money based off the year he had. And I don't know if Chris Ballard's going to be willing to give all that money to Sam Darnold in free agency. So I know Sam Darnold's been linked to the Colts, but I don't think they're going to get him. Zach Wilson, I mentioned earlier. I don't really want Zach Wilson either. Zach Wilson's he was the bust in with the Jets, and he got traded to the Broncos, and he's going to be a free agent. I mentioned Trey Lance. He's been in Dallas ever since he got moved from San Francisco to Dallas. Trey Lance is a young guy. I believe he'll be 25. So if you can bring Trey Lance in and get the best out of Trey Lance, Trey Lance, I think, could be a long-term solution for you, but I don't know if the Colts would bring him in. Jacoby Brissett, I mentioned earlier. Jacoby's a little older. He's 32. But Jacoby, as I mentioned earlier, was the backup for the Colts when Andrew Luck was here. And Jacoby still has a lot of respect in this Colts locker room. Like, there's a lot of guys like Quentin Nelson and all of them that were here when Jacoby was here and have a lot of respect for Jacoby. So I think if you're the Colts and you bring in Jacoby to be your backup again, I think a lot of people in this locker room would not have a problem with it because they know Jacoby. Taylor Heineke, which, if you're the Colts, man, every time you play Taylor Heineke, you lose. So it's a case of if you can't beat him, have him join you. Last few times we played Taylor Heineke, they've lost, which was the game against the Commanders, and the game against the Falcons. So, Marcus Mariota brings in a very similar skill set to Anthony Richardson, and Marcus Mariota is very mobile. I wouldn't mind Marcus Mariota. He's 31, so he's a little older. So I wouldn't mind him. Justin Fields, I alluded to earlier. Justin Fields, I think, has the potential to be your long-term fix at quarterback. It's just, I don't know if he can be it from the Steelers, and I don't know if the Steelers are going to let him go, because now Matthew Stafford is off the market. And if you're Pittsburgh, I'd imagine they're probably going to bring back one of Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. It's just who you're going to bring back if you're Pittsburgh. So, Joe Flacco, I don't think Joe Flacco's coming back. I think Joe Flacco is gone. He'll probably go somewhere else. Jameis Winston's a free agent. I know Chris Ballard has had interest in the past in bringing in Jameis Winston. I don't think Jameis Winston would beat out Anthony Richardson, if he does, then there's obviously something wrong with Anthony Richardson. But Jameis, I think, would be a really good backup. Mac Jones is another one where Mac Jones is more of a pocket passer, but he's a really good passer. I don't think Mac Jones would beat out Anthony Richardson, but that's someone to keep an eye on. Jimmy Garoppolo, I know Chris Ballard had interest in signing or trading for him as well. Jimmy G's older now. He's going to be 30. He's 33. So, I don't know. We'll see what they do with Jimmy Garoppolo. I mentioned Russell Wilson earlier. Desmond Ridder's going to be a free agent. Daniel Jones, I mentioned earlier as well. So, Daniel Jones' name, according to Jeremy Fowler, came up more than once with this Colts team. To me, he's polarizing. To me, he did a horrible job in New York, but again, who is going to do a good job with the Giants? And people have said, like, if there's going to be another Sam Darnold where the quarterback was struggling at his previous spot, and if he goes to a new team, he'll be better. They said if there's going to be another Sam Darnold, it's going to be Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones did have a really good 2022 season. That was his Pro Bowl year. So if you're the Colts, if you do sign Daniel Jones, who's going to be 28, you're going to have to figure out how to get the 2022 Daniel Jones back. So, that's just my 2 cents on the quarterback market. Just watch out for the Colts signing a quarterback, because I'd imagine, they're talking about bringing in competition for Richardson. So, running backs, personally, I think the Colts are going to go running back in the draft, but we'll go over running backs here. So, like I mentioned earlier, the Colts running back room right now, it's just Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Goodson and nobody else. And you have Trey Sermon as a free agent, and I would not bring Trey Sermon back. I don't think he's earned those backup running back minutes. So we'll start off at the top here. I don't think you're going to get Aaron Jones. I think Aaron Jones is going to go back to Minnesota. Raheem Mostert would be a really interesting one. If you want a really good pass-catching running back, Raheem Mostert would be your guy. The problem is he's a little injury-prone nowadays. So Najee Harris would be a really good one. The problem is Najee Harris is probably going to get a lot of money on the open market. So this one's an interesting one. And Ballard tried to sign him last year, and that's A.J. Dillon from the Packers. So A.J. Dillon's that big running back that came out from Boston College and was the running back with the Packers. Ballard tried to sign him last year, but he ended up going back to Green Bay on a 1-year deal. And he's going to hit the open market again. So don't be surprised if Ballard tries to sign him again. Nick Chubb. I love Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb's basically gonna take the route that Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry did last year, and that's he's gonna leave Cleveland and go somewhere else on a contender, whether it's the Chargers. I actually think he'd be really good with the Chargers, and just go that route. Javonte Williams from the Broncos would be a really good one. He's younger, and I think. See, here again, Javonte Williams is probably going to get a lot of money on the open market. Nyheim Miller-Hines, he was a Colts guy who asked to be traded, so I don't think Nyheim Hines is going to come back. J.K. Dobbins, who had a really good year for the Chargers. The problem is with J.K. Dobbins, other than this 1 year with the Chargers, he's been injury prone, so you might want to keep that in mind. Rico Dowdle from the Cowboys, who had a really good year for the Cowboys. I wouldn't mind bringing in Rico Dowdle, who would be a really good running back, too. I know people have mentioned Kareem Hunt. I don't know if I'd bring Kareem Hunt in. Trying to find some here. I mentioned Trey Sermon. I don't think he's going to come back. Kenneth Gainwell from the Eagles, who was Saquon Barkley's running back, too, would be a really good one. And you have a guy in Shane Steichen who worked with Kenneth Gainwell in the past, so that'd be a really good one. Elijah Mitchell from the 49ers, who had a really good season. He just fell out of favor in San Francisco behind Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason. So, Khalil Herbert from the Bengals, I would not mind. Khalil Herbert would be a really good running back, too. Jaylen Warren would be a really good one. The problem is Jaylen Warren's restricted, so you would have to fight Pittsburgh for him. Jordan Mason, again, I mentioned earlier, but he's also restricted. So those are probably the running backs that I would be looking at in free agency. But again, I think the Colts are going to go running back in the draft. I mentioned the list that they met with at the combine. So I think the Colts are going to go quarterback in the draft. We'll go to wide receiver here, and again, it's not a really good wide receiver class this year outside of T. Higgins. So, for wide receiver, I mentioned T. Higgins. I don't think the Colts are going to get T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins may very well get tagged again for a second straight year, because I don't think Cincinnati wants to let him walk out the door for nothing. And I've mentioned the Colts wide receiver room. It's a really good wide receiver room, so I don't think Chris Ballard's going to spend too much on here, but I think we'll talk about the wide receiver market. Stephon Diggs from the Texans. Stephon Diggs, I definitely don't think he's going to come to the Colts. I think he's going to go somewhere where he can get a lot of money, so I'd imagine New England, and stuff like that. And I'll mention, like, Deebo Samuel got traded yesterday from the 49ers to Washington, so I figured I'd mention that. Keenan Allen from the Bears. I think Keenan Allen's going to want to go to a contending team and try and win a Super Bowl. Amari Cooper from the Bills, again. I think he may very well stay in Buffalo. I think he had a really good year in Buffalo. And again, Buffalo is a contending team, so I'd imagine Amari Cooper will stay. Chris Godwin's going to be a big name. I think the Buccaneers would love to have him back. But if Chris Godwin leaves, I'd imagine Chris Godwin's going to get a lot of money on the open market. Brandon Cooks. I don't know. Brandon Cooks is getting a little older, and he's kind of regressed a little bit in Dallas. Deontay Johnson. Again, Deontay Johnson's, I think, one of those Steelers wide receivers that was really good in Pittsburgh and is going to struggle everywhere else. DeAndre Hopkins. I'd imagine DeAndre Hopkins is probably going to try and work his way back to Kansas City or go to a contending team where he can try and win a Super Bowl before he retires. Mike Williams. Mike Williams is good, but he's old and he's injury prone at this point. Robert Woods, a little older. He's going to be 33. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, I'd imagine Kansas City wants to have him back. So we'll see how that goes for him. Darius Slayton from the Giants, who's been a really solid wide receiver for the Giants. I wouldn't mind him coming to the Colts. Demarcus Robinson, who's had a history with Shane Steichen. Nelson Aguilar, who's also had a history with Shane Steichen. Other than that, not really. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I would love for the Colts take him away from a division rival. Rondale Moore from the Falcons, I would love Rondale Moore, which, if you guys know that name, he played at Purdue in college. I think you could use him in a lot of different ways, and I think Shane Steichen would have fun with Rondale Moore. I think other than that, there's not really any wide receivers that I would mention for the Colts. So yeah. So we'll get to tight ends, which is another big one. And I'll mention that Michael Mayer on the Raiders is currently being shopped around. So I wouldn't mind trading for him. But tight end is a big need for the Colts, and I would imagine if they don't sign one in free agency or trade for Michael Mayer, tight end's going to be taken pretty early in this draft for the Colts. And honestly, this tight end class in the draft is a lot better than the free agent tight end class, so we'll go over those really quickly. So the best one is Tyler Conklin from the Jets. Again, he's going to be 30. I wouldn't sign him. Juwan Johnson, I wouldn't mind. Juwan Johnson's got a really good skill set. He's coming from the Saints. Gerald Everett from the Bears, again, 30. Mo Alley-Cox is going to be a free agent from the Colts. If you bring Mo Alley-Cox back, I wouldn't mind it, but I don't want him at tight end 1. I want him as a tight end 2. This one would be really intriguing to me, because again, the Raiders kind of have a clog at tight end. Harrison Bryant from the Raiders would be really good. So, Austin Hooper from the Patriots, a really good receiving tight end. Zach Ertz is not going to leave Washington. He'll go back to the Commanders. Mike Gesicki would be a really good receiving tight end. Mercedes Lewis is a really good veteran tight end. CJ Uzomah, really good receiving one. But other than that, there's really no tight ends to really write home about. Maybe Peyton Hendershot, who played at IU. Maybe you can get a Peyton Hendershot in here. But really, not really any good tight ends in this free agent class. So I think if you're the Colts, if you're going to take a tight end, get a new tight end, I think you're going to have to get one in free agents in the draft. Offensive line. So I mentioned earlier, Ryan Kelly's a free agent. Will Fries is a free agent. I think if you cut Braden Smith, you'd save around $20 million in cap space, so I think cutting Braden Smith would be a good idea. But we'll start at tackle here. So, Cam Robinson's the big one. I don't think the Colts are going to sign Cam Robinson. I think we're pretty set at left tackle with Bernhard Raimann. Ronnie Stanley, I think, is the big name one, and I think he's probably going to leave Baltimore and go get a big contract from, say, like a New England who needs offensive line help. Same thing with Jedrick Wills. I don't think Jedrick Wills is going to go back to Cleveland. I think he's gone. I wouldn't mind him if he's willing to play right tackle, because he's going to be 26. So I think Jedrick Wills is going to get a big contract from somebody, probably New England, but Andres Pete would be a good veteran. Probably have to kick him inside the guard. Dylan Radunz, did not have a good season for Tennessee, but would be a good bench guy. Matt Pert would be a really good bench guy. Andre Dillard would be a good bench guy. Let's go over to guard here. So guard, Zach Martin retired. Unfortunately, Brandon Scherf would be a good one, but he's getting a little older. He's going to be 30. He's 33. James Daniels would be a really good one. Pat McCarry. Mekhi Becton would be a really good one. If you lose Will Fries in free agency, Mekhi Becton would be a really good one, and Mekhi Becton was another one that the Eagles signed that had a resurgence in Philadelphia, which Philadelphia has like the best offensive line coach in the whole NFL. So, but Mekhi Becton, they moved him from tackle to right guard, and he had a really good season at right guard for the Eagles. So, that would be a really good find for the Colts if you can get Mekhi Becton. Especially if you lose Will Fries, which we'll get to Will Fries in a minute. Reisner, Tevin Jenkins would be a really good one. If you lose Will Fries, Liam Eichenberg would also be really good if you lose Will Fries. Glowinski, I wouldn't mind bringing back as a bench one. Don't want Matt Pryor back. Let's see here. Yep, Will Fries, I mentioned, is going to be a free agent. I would love to bring Will Fries back, and I think the Colts want to bring him back. It just depends on what kind of money he's going to get offered on the open market. And I think he's going to get offered a lot of money. So, hopefully the Colts can bring Will Fries back, because he's been so good for us. But, we'll look at center just because Ryan Kelly's going to be a free agent. And I think if you lose Ryan Kelly, I wouldn't mind signing a veteran center to be a backup. Austin Corbett would be a pretty good one. Michael Dieter would be a good one. Let's see here. Nick Gates, who's coming from Philadelphia. Any Philadelphia center I wouldn't mind. Bradley Bozeman would be a good one. Shane Lemieux. Yeah, I think those are... Wesley French is a restricted one. I'd imagine they bring Wesley French back. We'll go to defense now. So, edge rushers. So, edge rushing class for the Colts right now. I think edge rush is a very underrated need. I don't think judging from what I was hearing, the buzz I was hearing from the combine, I don't think Dayo Odeyingbo is going to come back. I think in Dayo's mind, Dayo's going to get a big contract on the open market from a team like the Chargers or somebody. There's going to be another team that's going to offer Dayo Odeyingbo a lot of money, like a double-digit a year type of contract is what Dayo Odeyingbo is going to get on the open market, I think, and I think that's going to be a little too much for the Colts, so I don't think Dayo Odeyingbo is going to come back. But we'll look at some guys here. So Khalil Mack, I don't think you're going to get Khalil Mack. I think Khalil Mack's going to want to go somewhere again where he can contend and try and win a Super Bowl before he retires because he's 34. Hassan Reddick, I don't think you're getting him either. I think Hassan Reddick wants a whole bunch of money. So Matt Judon again, don't think you're going to get him. I think Matt Judon wants a lot of money. DeMarcus Lawrence is injury prone. He's older. He's going to be 33. He's injury prone and he's not the same DeMarcus Lawrence he once was. So I'd imagine DeMarcus Lawrence is probably going to want to go to a contending team where he can be kind of that veteran presence and try and win a Super Bowl. Josh Sweat, I would love Josh Sweat. Again, Josh Sweat's probably going to go out on the open market and get a lot of money out there. Chase Young would be a good one. Let's see here. What else? Brandon Graham's getting a little older. Zach Bond, we'll get to him at linebacker. He's more of a linebacker. Not really much on here. Calais Campbell would be a good veteran guy. Azeez Ojulari would be really good. I think Azeez Ojulari is probably going to get a lot of money on the open market. I mentioned Dayo Odeyingbo. He's going to get a double-digit contract from another team. So I don't think Dayo Odeyingbo is going to come back. Malcolm Kuntz. So Malcolm Kuntz would be a really good one. If you guys remember Malcolm Kuntz, in 2020, he had a fantastic 2023. And he was Max Crosby's running mate in Vegas. And Malcolm Kuntz didn't play at all this year because he got hurt. But Malcolm Kuntz would be a really good signing for the Colts. If they could get him, that'd be a really good one. Because Malcolm Kuntz, when he plays, is really good. He just needs to stay healthy. Let's see here. What else? Is there anyone else on this list that really moves the needle for me. Not really. So we'll look at defensive tackle, which defensive tackle is another need. Defensive tackle, I think, is a very underrated need on this team because you got your top two are Buckner and Stewart, who are really good, but the problem is they're both north of 30, and I don't think, in 2, 3, 4 years down the line, I think defensive tackle is going to be a really big need. So, B.J. Hill would be a really interesting one. He would come over with Lou Anarumo from Cincinnati, and that would be a really good 3 defensive tackle rotation between Buckner, Stewart, and B.J. Hill. That'd be a really interesting one I wouldn't mind seeing. Javon Kinlaw would be a good one. Maybe you can get him back on track. Jerry Tillery, if you want a run-stopping defensive tackle, that'd be... Levi Onwuzurike from Detroit would be a really good one. You'd have to fork over some money to him, but that'd be a really good one. And he's young enough. He's going to be 27 to where when Buckner and Stewart are gone, you'd still have Levi Onwuzurike, and defensive tackle wouldn't be too much of a need, too much of a big need. So Levi Onwuzurike would be a really good one. Milton Williams from the Eagles, he also would be a really good one. I think Milton Williams, and if you watched him in the playoffs this year, he was really good. The problem is, I think Milton Williams is going to get a big contract on the open market. Same thing with Osa Odighizuwe. I'm horrible with names. He's from the Cowboys. Both of them, I think, are going to get big contracts from teams. And they're both pretty young. Milton Williams is going to be 26, and Osa is 26. So I think they're both going to get a big contract on the open market. But I think other than that, I'm not seeing anyone else that really moves the needle for me. Yeah, so those guys, and again, defensive tackle is probably going to be an underrated one. We'll look at linebacker, which is also a really big one. I mentioned Zach Bond earlier. Zach Bond would be excellent. He had a great year for the Eagles this year. He had a resurgence year. I don't know if you're going to be able to get him because he's going to cost you a lot of money. But I would love Zach Bond. Let's look here. This is more of pass rushing outside linebacker, which is not something the Colts would need because we're a 4-3 defense. So we'll look at inside linebacker here. Lavonte David would be interesting, but I don't think Lavonte David is going to leave Tampa Bay. I think he's going to be a Buck for life. Bobby Wagner, again, would be a really good veteran signing, and he did amazing this year for Washington. If you're Washington, you have a bunch of cap space this offseason. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't bring him back. Devondre Campbell would be a good one. Very good veteran one. Willie Gay. Cody Barton from the Broncos, I think, would be an excellent signing. Cody Barton, I think, would complement Zaire Franklin really well. Cody Barton's not exactly the most athletic linebacker, but Cody Barton is really good at being at the right place at the right time. A lot of the time. He's very smart linebacker, so Cody Barton from the Broncos, I think I would really like. Let's see here. Not really. Not Zach Cunningham. So let's see here. Let's just go to, because there's some other linebackers I want to hit on. Monte David, Jerome Baker, Isaiah Simmons wouldn't be too bad. I do not bring EJ Speed. I would not bring EJ Speed back because linebacker is a really big need, and EJ Speed, him and Zaire Franklin just don't mesh well together. They're basically the same player. Let's see here. Akeem Davis Gaither, if you want to bring a linebacker over with gosh, I'm blanking on his name now, the Colts' new defensive coordinator, with Lou Anarumo, Akeem Davis Gaither would be a really good one, because he was with him in Cincinnati. This one's a really good one. Troy Dye from the Chargers. He wouldn't cost you a whole lot, and he's a good linebacker. Nick Bolton from the Chiefs I would love, but the problem is I think the Chiefs are probably going to tag him, or I don't think the Chiefs are going to let Nick Bolton leave. But Troy Dye would be a really good one. Let's see here. This one's a really good one I really like for the Colts, and I think he'd be a really good one. Divine Diablo, the linebacker from the Raiders. He's a safety to linebacker convert and is a really good coverage linebacker. And I've loved Divine Diablo for years. He was really good with the Raiders throughout his time there, and I would love Divine Diablo on the Colts at linebacker. This one's another one I would really like, and I think has the potential to be a really good signing, like Chris Ballard would make, and that's Ernest Jones from the Seahawks. Ernest Jones is a really interesting one. He's only 25. So Ernest Jones would be like a long-term solution at linebacker. But he played for 3 different teams last year. He was on the Titans. He got traded to a different team, and then he got let go and signed with the Seahawks, and he had a really good year for the Seahawks. And I would not mind bringing in Ernest Jones. If you want like a potentially long-term solution at linebacker, next to Zaire Franklin, and you have him and Jalen Carlisle compete for that second linebacker spot, Ernest Jones would be a really good one. Let's see here. Let's see if there's another one I like. Not really. Yeah, there's one I'm trying to look for, but he's not on here for some reason. It's another Raiders linebacker, but we'll get to him if the Colts signed him. But there's some good linebackers in this free agent class. Corner, that's a really big one. I think the Colts are going to need. Bringing in another veteran corner, I think would be a really good idea. So, and this corner free agent class is a really good one. And we'll start out with Carlton Davis from the Lions. Carlton Davis, Super Bowl winner, knows what it takes to win. Same thing with Charvarius Ward. Won a Super Bowl with Kansas City. Been to a Super Bowl with San Francisco. Knows what it takes to win. He's probably going to leave San Francisco. DJ Reed, another good veteran corner. Byron Murphy from the Vikings, but I don't think the Vikings are going to let him go. Jeff Okudah from the Texans would be an amazing signing. Jeff Okudah would be a really good one. Rasul Douglas from the Bills would be a really good one. Let's see here. Mike Hughes from the Falcons would be good. Christian Fulton from the Chargers would be a good one. There's a lot of them. Asante Samuel Jr., that'd be a really good signing for the Colts at corner. Paulson Adebo from the Saints. Like, it's a really good corner free agent class this year. So if you're the Colts, and which you need, Ahkello Witherspoon, you need a corner. I think signing a corner, and that's why I think the Colts are probably going to sign a corner. Isaiah Rodgers, I wouldn't mind bringing him back. Caleb Farley, a young guy who really hasn't gotten the chance yet. There's Nate Hobbs from the Raiders I would love. He's a good corner. Yeah, this corner free agent class is really good. So if I'm the Colts, you need some corners in there to get some competition. There are some really good corners. I listed 14. There are some really good corners in this free agent class. So I would go out and I would sign 1, maybe 2 corners just to combat this corner room. Safety, again, Julian Blackmon's a free agent. I don't think Julian Blackmon's coming back. So you need, especially at free safety, you need a guy. Justin Simmons would be a really good one. I know he's getting a little older, but Justin Simmons can still play, man. He's a good safety. This one is going to be the really big one. If the Colts sign him, that's a big fish, and that's Javon Holland, who's 25 and is a really good safety. If you want Javon Holland, man, you're going to have to fork over some money, because he's gonna get a really big contract, but he'd be a really good one. Rodney McLeod, I know he's getting a little older, but I loved him when he was on the Colts, and I would not mind bringing him back. And if you need him to start like a game or 2 for you, he'd be really good. Andre Cisco from the Jaguars would be a really good one. Cam Bynum from the Vikings would be really good. Jason Pinnock from the Giants. Trayvon Merrick from the Raiders. Like, this is a really good safety class at free safety. So I'd imagine if you're the Colts, you're probably going to be looking at safety this offseason, especially in free agency and in the draft. So, yeah, Trayvon Merrick would be a really good one. I mentioned Rodney McLeod, Andre Cisco. Von Bell, if you want a guy to come in here who knows, who can play both safety spots and knows Lou Anarumo's defense, Von Bell would be a really good one. Let's see here. Is there any other ones? I mentioned just Talino Hufanga from the 49ers, who's more of a strong safety, but is really young, and I think would be a really good. Him and Nick Cross can compete for that safety spot, but that'd be a really good one. He'd cost you a lot of money, though. That's the downside. But that's a really good safety class, and I think we'll end it here. But if you're the Colts, you have a lot of free agent options out there in free agency. So hopefully the Colts can fill in. I know Chris Ballard promised to be better in free agency this year, and he said he needs to create more competition. I think that needs to involve him being more active in free agency and addressing some of these needs, especially on defense. This is a really good defense free agent class, and I think especially in the secondary and at linebacker. So if you're Chris Ballard and you want to create competition like you've said, I think you need to utilize free agency this offseason. But I think we'll end it here, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And again, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe and share it with your friends so we can get more people in here. But I will catch you guys later. Thank you guys so much.